The dust storms on Kepler 442b never stopped. They moved across the dead planet like angry ghosts, carrying particles of sand that had once been mountains. Dr. Yuna stood at the edge of the excavation site, watching the robotic diggers work 3 kilometers below the surface. Her reflection stared back at her from the reinforced glass of the observation dome. Behind her, 12 different species worked at their stations, speaking in languages that her translator chip converted into Korean. The structure they had found was impossible. It shouldn't exist. Every scan they ran came back with errors. The walls were made of something that their computers simply labeled as unknown material. No atomic signature. No energy reading. It just was. Yuna had been leading archaeological expeditions for 15 years. She had explored dead civilizations on 40 different worlds. She had walked through cities that had been abandoned for 10,000 years. But she had never seen anything like this. The vault, as they called it, was older than any civilization in the known galaxy. The dating scans put it at 50 million years minimum. Krath, the lead engineer from the Kralik species, approached her station. His forearms gestured in frustration. "We have tried everything, Dr. Yuna. The entrance will not respond to any of our attempts." Yuna nodded. She had watched the attempts for 3 weeks now. Every species on the team had tried to open the vault. The Kraliks had offered their silicon-based genetics. The Vorthans, tall beings who looked like living crystals, had tried their quantum state cells. The Melkori, creatures made of pure energy contained in mechanical suits, had attempted to interface directly with the door mechanism. The result was always the same. A red symbol would pulse on the biomatter scanner at the entrance. A low sound would echo from within the walls. Rejection. "Perhaps it is not meant to be opened," suggested Vel, one of the Vorthan researchers. Her crystalline body reflected the artificial lights in rainbow patterns. "Everything is meant to be opened," Yuna replied. "We just haven't found the right key yet." The entrance to the vault was surprisingly simple compared to the rest of the structure. There was a flat panel at human chest height, about 1 meter wide. Above it, symbols glowed in a soft blue light. The symbols matched no known language in the galactic database. The team's linguistic AI had run 7 million comparison analyses. Nothing. Below the symbols was the biomatter scanner. It looked like a handprint, but the shape was wrong for most species. Too small for Kraliks, too flat for Vorthans, too solid for Melkori. Taman had noticed this on the first day, but he hadn't said anything. He was the human xenoarchaeologist on the team, and humans were still new to the galactic community. Only 200 years since first contact. Most species treated humans like children, who had just learned to walk, polite but dismissive. Taman had learned to stay quiet and observe. Let the older species take the lead. Learn from their experience. His job was to catalog artifacts and run database searches. He was good at it. He didn't mind being in the background. But now, watching another attempt fail as Krath tried to use a genetic sample from his third arm, Taman felt something strange. An instinct, a pull. "Dr. Yuna," he said quietly. "May I try?" The room went silent. 12 species turned to look at him. Krath made a sound that the translator converted to laughter. "The human. The entrance has rejected species with 50,000 years of genetic optimization. What makes you think your primitive DNA will succeed?" Yuna held up a hand. "Science requires complete data. We should test every member of the expedition." She looked at Taman. "Go ahead." Taman walked to the entrance. His hands were shaking slightly. He felt foolish. Krath was right. Humans were newcomers. Their genetics were messy, unoptimized, full of evolutionary dead ends and leftover code from their animal ancestors. If perfect species couldn't open this door, how could humans? But his instinct said to try. He placed his hand on the scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Taman started to pull his hand away, embarrassed. Then the panel began to hum. The sound was different from the rejection tone. This was higher, clearer, almost musical. The blue symbols above the scanner turned green. They began to scroll rapidly, changing and shifting. New text appeared, symbols that Taman had never seen before, but somehow his mind could read them. Or maybe the translator chip was working. He couldn't tell. Then a voice spoke. It was neutral, without gender or emotion, but it spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Human detected. DNA analysis in progress. Scanning genetic markers. Markers confirmed. Classification, human anomaly variant. Status approved. Welcome, inheritor. Access granted to vault systems." Opening primary entrance. The massive doors, each one 10 meters tall and 5 meters wide, began to move. They slid apart without sound, revealing darkness beyond. Air rushed out, stale and cold. The darkness inside seemed to move, then lights began to glow. Blue bioluminescent patterns spread across walls that stretched far beyond what should have been possible. The vault was bigger on the inside than the outside measurements had shown. Taman stood frozen, his hand still on the scanner. His mind couldn't process what had just happened. The vault had recognized him, had called him an inheritor, had granted him access. Behind him, chaos erupted. Krath was shouting. Vel was making high-pitched sounds of disbelief. Someone activated an emergency communication to their homeworld. Alarms began ringing as the expedition's security protocols engaged. Yuna moved first. She grabbed Taman's arm and pulled him back from the entrance. "Nobody goes inside until we establish safety protocols," she ordered. Her voice cut through the noise. "Seal this area. I want atmospheric analysis, radiation scans, and structural surveys now." The team scrambled to follow orders. Drones flew into the vault's entrance, sending back data. The atmospheric readings were strange but not dangerous. The radiation was minimal. The structure appeared stable, but none of that mattered compared to the central question everyone was asking. Why had the vault accepted human DNA? Within an hour, every government in the known galaxy received the same message. A vault older than any living civilization had been opened by a human. The implications were staggering. Taman sat in the expedition's medical bay while Minho, the human geneticist who had arrived on a supply ship 2 weeks earlier, ran scans. "I don't understand it," Minho said, staring at the genetic data. "Your DNA is completely normal for a human. No mutations, no unusual markers. You're actually remarkably average, Taman. No offense." "None taken," Taman said quietly. His mind was still replaying the moment when the vault had spoken. Inheritor. What did that mean? Dr. Yuna entered the medical bay. Her face was tight with stress. "The Galactic Council has been notified. Ambassador Jiho is traveling here from the nearest human colony. Every species in the expedition has filed formal reports to their governments." She looked at Taman. "In 3 weeks, you've become the most important human in the galaxy." "How do you feel?" Taman looked at his hands. Normal hands. Average human hands. "Confused," he admitted. "Scared. That thing called me an inheritor." "What am I inheriting?" "That's what we need to find out," Yuna said. She pulled up a holographic display showing the vault's interior. The drones had mapped 3 kilometers of corridors so far, and they still hadn't found the end. "Tomorrow we go inside. You, me, Minho, and a security team. Whatever is in there, humanity needs to understand it before anyone else does." That night, Taman couldn't sleep. He stood at the observation dome watching the dust storms move across the dead planet. Somewhere below the vault waited, a structure 50 million years old that had recognized something in his DNA, something that made him an inheritor of whatever secrets lay inside. He thought about his ancestors on Earth, farmers and merchants, teachers and soldiers, normal people living normal lives. None of them had ever imagined that their descendant would stand on an alien world and be recognized by something older than mountains. The vault's entrance glowed with blue light in the darkness, waiting, patient, ready to reveal secrets that would change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves, and Taman would be the first to walk inside. The interior of the vault smelled like nothing Taman had ever experienced. Not quite metal, not quite stone, something ancient and preserved, like opening a box that had been sealed before humans learned to make fire. Yuna led the exploration team through the entrance. Taman walked beside her with Minho and 4 security personnel behind them. Their boots made soft sounds on the floor, which was smooth and slightly warm to the touch. The bioluminescent patterns on the walls pulsed in steady rhythms like a heartbeat. "Atmospheric readings are stable," Minho reported, checking his scanner. "Oxygen levels actually better than our base camp. Temperature is comfortable. This place is maintaining itself somehow even after 50 million years." The corridor stretched ahead of them, curving gently to the left. The walls were covered in symbols that shifted and changed as they walked past. Taman reached out to touch one, and the symbol expanded, projecting a holographic image into the air. It showed a double helix like human DNA but wrapped in a spiral of stars. "Don't touch anything else," Yuna warned. But her voice was full of wonder, not anger. As a scientist, this was the discovery of a lifetime. As a human, it was terrifying. They walked for 20 minutes before reaching the first chamber. The room was circular, about 50 meters in diameter. The ceiling was high, maybe 20 meters up, and covered in more of the glowing patterns. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with what looked like a control interface. Taman approached it slowly. The interface activated as he got close, responding to his presence. Holographic screens appeared in the air, showing information in that same strange script that somehow made sense to him. "Can you read this?" Yuna asked. "I think so," Taman said. "Or maybe it's reading me. I don't know how to explain it." He gestured at one of the screens. "This is a catalog. It's showing what's stored in this section of the vault." Minho moved closer, his scanner working overtime. "The genetic signature requirement makes sense now. This interface is designed to interact with human neural patterns. It's literally translating itself based on how your brain processes information." The catalog showed hundreds of items, technology that Taman didn't understand, even with the translation effect. But the images were clear enough. Weapons that looked like they could tear apart stars. Engines that seemed to bend space itself. Medical devices that showed impossible things like rebuilding destroyed organs from nothing. "We need to document everything," Yuna said. She activated her recording equipment, but the signals couldn't penetrate the vault's walls. They would have to rely on memory and manual notes. Back at the base camp, chaos had taken over. Ambassador Jiho had arrived from the human colony 3 days ago, and his ship had been followed by diplomatic vessels from 17 different species. The small research base was now surrounded by a fleet of ships, all demanding access to the vault. Jiho was a patient man. He had been a diplomat for 30 years, handling the delicate work of representing humanity in a galaxy where they were still seen as children. But even his patience was being tested by the constant demands. The Kralix Federation was the worst. War Master Kethris herself had arrived, bringing 3 military vessels with her. She was ancient by human standards, over 8,000 years old, and she viewed humanity with barely concealed contempt. "Your species has been in space for 2 centuries, she said during the latest council session. Her translator gave her voice a harsh metallic quality. "The Kralix Federation has maintained galactic peace for 8,000 years. What right do humans have to claim exclusive access to precursor technology?" Jiho kept his expression neutral. "We are not claiming exclusive access, War Master. We are simply the only species the Vault recognizes. We didn't design this system. We're as surprised as everyone else." "Convenient," Kethris said. The word dripped with suspicion. A Vorthon diplomat, her crystalline body reflecting the conference room lights, spoke up. "Perhaps the humans have known about their connection to the precursors all along. Perhaps this discovery is merely the revealing of a long-held secret." "That's ridiculous," Jiho replied. "Human history is well documented. We evolved on Earth over millions of years. There's no evidence of precursor interference." "That you have shared," Kethris said. The meeting ended with no resolution, just more suspicion and anger. Jiho returned to his quarters exhausted. He sent a priority message to Earth, warning them that the political situation was deteriorating fast. Inside the vault, Taman's team had discovered 3 more chambers. Each one contained technology beyond anything the galactic community had ever seen. One room held what appeared to be power generators no larger than a fist, but the readings suggested they could power an entire city. Another chamber was full of data storage devices, crystalline structures that held more information than all of human civilization had ever created. But it was the 3rd chamber that changed everything. Minho found it when he wandered down a side corridor. Following some instinct he couldn't explain, the room was different from the others. Smaller, more intimate, the walls were covered in what looked like historical records, images and text flowing in streams of light. "Yuna Taman," he called. "You need to see this." They found him standing in the center of the room, tears running down his face. The images on the walls showed the story of human creation. Not evolution, creation. The precursors had been real, and they had been everywhere in the galaxy. 50 million years ago, they had controlled thousands of worlds, but they hadn't found intelligent life. They had made it. The images showed laboratories, genetic sequences being constructed, species being designed, tested, refined. The precursors had seeded the galaxy with life, engineering hundreds of different intelligent species across millions of years. But something had gone wrong. Each species they created would rise, build civilizations, reach for the stars, and then destroy themselves. War resource collapse, genetic failure. The patterns repeated over and over. Taman watched the images flow past. He saw species that looked almost human, but not quite, variations on the same theme. The precursors had been trying to create something specific, and they had failed dozens of times. We weren't the first attempt, Minho whispered. We were just the latest. Yuna was reading the text that accompanied the images. Her face had gone pale. They called us the Anomaly Protocol. The final attempt. They modified our genetics in specific ways, learning from all their previous failures. The modifications were subtle but important. Humans had shorter lifespans than most of the precursors' earlier creations. This created urgency, a drive to accomplish things quickly. Humans had stronger emotions, leading to both conflict and cooperation. Humans had a capacity for irrationality that the earlier, more logical species had lacked. They made us flawed on purpose, Taman said. Every other species they created was optimized perfect, and every one of them failed. The final image showed the precursors themselves. They looked almost human, but taller, more refined. The text explained what had happened to them. They had solved the ultimate problem, learned how to transcend physical reality and exist in higher dimensions. But the process had killed 99% of their population. The survivors had fled into quantum space, leaving behind only their vaults and their hopes. We're their children, Minho said. Literally. We were designed, not evolved. Everything we think we are, everything we think makes us human was programmed into our DNA by beings who died 50 million years ago. Yuna sat down heavily on the floor. As a scientist, she should have been excited. This was proof of directed panspermia, evidence of precursor civilization, the answer to questions humanity had asked for centuries. But as a person, as a human being, she felt hollow. Who was she? If her very existence was engineered by someone else. They returned to base camp with the recordings, with the data, with the terrible knowledge of what humanity really was. Jiho listened to their report in silence, his face growing more troubled with each revelation. We need to keep this quiet, he said finally. If the other species learn that humans were specifically engineered to inherit precursor technology, there's no telling how they'll react. But it was already too late. Similar vaults had begun activating on 17 different worlds, all of them in human-controlled space. Each one responded only to human DNA. Each one contained similar technology and similar records. Within days, every intelligence agency in the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity wasn't a natural species. They were a designed tool, created by the precursors to inherit their legacy. The question everyone was asking was simple. Inherit what? And why? Taman stood at the observation dome again, watching the ships arrive. More every day from species he had never heard of, all of them demanding answers that humanity didn't have. In the vault below, more secrets waited. The central chamber remained sealed, requiring a genetic sequence that no living human possessed. Whatever the precursors had really intended, whatever their final purpose for humanity had been, it was still locked away. But Taman had a terrible feeling that they were running out of time to find out. 6 months had passed since Taman first opened the vault. Earth was in chaos. Protests filled the streets of major cities. Some people celebrated being chosen by the precursors. Others felt betrayed, like their entire existence was a lie. Religious leaders argued about what it meant for the soul if humans were designed rather than created by God or evolved naturally. Dr. Yuna had returned to Seoul for 3 weeks to speak with the Global Assembly. She stood before representatives from every nation, trying to explain discoveries that challenged everything humanity understood about itself. The sessions were brutal. Questions came in waves, many of them unanswerable. Are we even human if we were engineered? Asked a representative from Brazil. Of course we are, Yuna replied. Our origins don't change our consciousness, our experiences, our choices. We are what we make ourselves, not what someone else intended us to be. But even as she said it, she wondered if she believed it herself. Taman stayed at the vault with Minho and Suman, a new addition to the team. Suman was a neural archaeologist, someone who specialized in decoding extinct species communication methods by analyzing how their brains processed information. She was young, only 30 years old, with short black hair and glasses she wore even though corrective surgery could have fixed her vision years ago. She said she liked how they made the world look slightly softer. Together, they had activated 63% of the vault systems. The technology they had discovered was already changing human civilization. Power generation breakthroughs that made fusion reactors look primitive, medical scanners that could diagnose any disease in seconds, materials stronger and lighter than anything previously known. But the central chamber remained locked. Its entrance was similar to the vault's main door, but the genetic requirements were different. More specific. The scanner would activate when humans approached, but then display a message. Insufficient genetic expression. Required markers not present in current DNA structure. It's like the vault is asking for a version of humanity that doesn't exist yet, Minho explained during one of their research sessions. He projected genetic sequences into the air, comparing them to the requirements. The markers it wants are present in our DNA, but they're dormant. Turned off. We'd need to activate them somehow. Can we do that? Taman asked. Technically, yes. The vault even includes instructions for the activation process, but it would fundamentally change whoever underwent it. They wouldn't be entirely human anymore, at least not the way we currently understand human. Suman was working on a different puzzle. She had been analyzing the precursor language patterns, trying to understand not just what they said, but how they thought. Late one night, Taman found her still in the research lab, surrounded by holographic symbols. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't sleep," she replied. "I'm close to something. Look at this." She gestured at the symbols, which rearranged themselves in response to her movement. The precursor language isn't just communication. It's alive, responsive. It adapts to whoever is reading it. But underneath all that adaptation, there's a base structure, and that structure is telling a story we haven't been reading correctly. Over the next 3 days, Suman decoded what she called the deep narrative. It was information buried in the very structure of the precursor language, present in every message but hidden unless you knew how to look for it. The story it told was terrifying. The precursors hadn't been the first advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had discovered evidence of an even older species, one that had existed billions of years ago and had disappeared completely. Not transcended like the precursors, just gone, erased, and the precursors had found out why. There was something out there, beyond the known galaxy. Something that appeared every few 100 million years and eliminated any civilization that became too advanced. The precursors called it the correction. They didn't know what it was exactly. An automated system left by an even older civilization, a natural force that maintained galactic balance, a living entity? Their records were unclear. What was clear was that the precursors knew it was coming back. They had detected the patterns, the warning signs. They had maybe 1,000 years before the correction arrived at their space. Not enough time to prepare a defense. Not enough time to transcend as a whole civilization. So they had done something desperate. They had created insurance. They had seeded the galaxy with hundreds of engineered species, each one designed to survive the correction in different ways. Most of those species had failed and destroyed themselves, but a few, including humanity, had survived long enough to potentially face the correction when it returned. The vaults were gifts and warnings both. Technology to help humanity defend themselves, instructions for genetic modifications that might let them survive what the precursors couldn't, and most importantly, a countdown. "How long do we have?" Yuna asked when Suman presented her findings. She had returned from Earth 2 days ago, looking exhausted and older than her 45 years. Suman pulled up a calculation. Based on the precursor models and the current date, approximately 18 months. Maybe less. The correction moves through space in a pattern that's somewhat predictable, but there are variables we don't fully understand. The room fell silent. 18 months. A year and a half before something that had destroyed the precursors would arrive at human space. "We need to tell the Galactic Council," Jiho said. He had been listening to the presentation via secure transmission from his diplomatic vessel. "This isn't just a human problem. If the correction is real, it threatens every species in the galaxy." But when he brought it to the council, the response was divided. Some species believed the warnings. Others thought it was a human trick, a way to gain sympathy and support for their claim to the vaults. The Kralix Federation was particularly skeptical. "Convenient that these warnings appear just as your species gains access to precursor technology," War Master Kethris said. "Convenient that the supposed threat gives you justification to rapidly militarize." "We're not militarizing," Jiho insisted. "We're trying to prepare for a threat that could destroy all of us." "If the threat is real," Kethris replied, then the logical response is to place all precursor technology under Krallick's military control. We have 8,000 years of experience defending the galaxy. You have 200. The political situation spiraled. 3 human colonies came under economic blockade by a coalition of 7 species who viewed humanity's emergence as an existential threat. Ships carrying supplies were turned back. Trade agreements were canceled. Human diplomats found themselves excluded from meetings they should have been invited to. On Earth, the crisis created strange political alliances. The Ascensionists, who believed humanity should embrace the genetic modifications and accept their role as precursor heirs, were gaining support. Their leader was a charismatic woman named Hannah, who argued that humanity's survival depended on becoming what the precursors intended them to be. The Preservationists, led by an older man named Deho, argued the opposite. If humans changed their fundamental genetics, they would lose what made them human. Better to face extinction as themselves than to survive as something else. And then there were the Rejectionists, a smaller but growing movement that wanted to destroy the vaults entirely. Their logic was simple. The vaults had brought nothing but trouble. Other species hated humanity now. War seemed inevitable. Better to give up the precursor legacy than to fight over it. Taman watched these debates from the vault, feeling increasingly disconnected from the politics. He spent his days exploring the endless chambers, discovering new technologies and new warnings. The vault had sections that dealt with warfare, showing weapons that could sterilize planets. It had sections on transcendence explaining the process that had killed most of the precursors. It had libraries of knowledge about physics, mathematics, biology, and fields that humans didn't even have names for yet. One day, while exploring a previously sealed section, he found something that made him call Yuna and Minho immediately. It was a chamber filled with biological samples preserved in stasis fields that had maintained them for 50 million years. The samples were from all the species the precursors had created before humanity. Dozens of different intelligent races, all of them extinct, and in the center of the chamber, in a special container, was something labeled the Architects, immediate predecessor to Final Protocol. Minho analyzed the genetic material carefully. They were almost identical to humans, he said, wonder in his voice. 99.9% genetic similarity. But the differences are fascinating. They were optimized for intelligence, cooperation, logical thinking, perfect social structures, no genetic predisposition for violence or irrationality. What happened to them? Taman asked. Suman had found the historical records. She projected them into the air, and they all watched as the story of the Architects unfolded. They had been brilliant. Their civilization had lasted 10,000 years, longer than any previous precursor creation. They had explored hundreds of star systems, built megastructures, solved problems of energy and resources that most species never overcame. And then they had encountered something unexpected. An anomaly from outside their galaxy. Not the correction itself, but something related to it. A probe maybe, or a scout. Something that didn't operate by the physical laws the Architects understood. Their perfect logic had failed them. Their optimized brains couldn't adapt to something truly alien. They had analyzed it, studied it, tried to understand it using their rational methods, and while they were studying it, it had destroyed them. Not with weapons, it had simply broadcast information that their minds couldn't process. The Architects had gone insane, every single one of them, within days. The precursors had watched it happen, had recorded it all, and had learned the lesson. Perfection was weakness. To survive something truly alien, you needed flexibility, irrationality, the ability to think in ways that didn't make sense. You needed humanity's flaws. That's why they made us this way, Yuna said quietly. All the things we hate about ourselves, the emotions that cloud judgment, the violence we're capable of, the ability to believe things that aren't logical. The precursors gave us those traits because they watched perfection fail. Taman thought about his own life, the times he had made decisions based on gut feeling rather than logic, the arguments he had with friends that made no sense but somehow felt necessary, the moments of fear, anger, joy that had nothing to do with rational thought. The message arrived at dawn. Taman was in his quarters trying to sleep despite the constant noise from the research base that never truly shut down anymore. His communication device buzzed with an urgent alert. Earth priority transmission. The global assembly had fractured. 3 continental governments had declared support for the ascensionist position and had begun programs to develop the genetic modifications. 4 others had formally opposed this, calling it a violation of human nature. 2 more regions had declared neutrality, but were clearly preparing for civil conflict. The fragile unity that had held humanity together for 2 centuries was breaking apart. Taemin dressed quickly and went to find Yuna. He found her in the main research lab with Sumin and Minho, all of them staring at the same transmission. Yuna's face was tight with stress. "How bad is it?" Taemin asked. "Bad," she replied. "Fighting has broken out in 3 cities. Nothing major yet, just protests that turned violent. But it's going to get worse. People are scared and angry, and they're taking it out on each other." Minho pulled up another display. "And it's not just Earth. Every human colony is reporting similar divisions. Some colonies are declaring independence, saying they'll pursue the modifications regardless of what Earth decides. Others are threatening to cut off any colony that does." "We're destroying ourselves," Sumin said quietly, "just like all the other species the precursors created. We're not even waiting for the correction to arrive. We're doing its job for it," the vault itself had noticed. Over the past week, new systems had activated throughout the structure. Sections that had been sealed were now opening on their own, revealing technology that seemed designed specifically for current human needs. Faster-than-light communication systems that could keep scattered colonies in contact, defensive weapons but also shields and protective technologies, medical devices that could heal injuries from the growing violence. It was as if the vault was trying to help, trying to give humanity the tools they needed to survive their own divisions. Taemin spent more time in the central chamber's antechamber, staring at the sealed door. The genetic requirements were clear now, thanks to Minho's analysis. The modifications needed to open it wouldn't make someone superhuman. They would just activate dormant parts of human DNA, turning on genetic switches that had been intentionally left off. "I could do it," Minho said one evening. He had been running calculations for weeks, developing a safe protocol for the genetic activation. "I could undergo the modifications. Open the central chamber. See what's inside?" "No," Yuna said immediately. "We don't know what it would do to you. The changes might be irreversible." "Everything we've learned suggests the modifications are safe," Minho argued. "The precursors designed them carefully. They're not trying to kill us. They want us to succeed." "Want us to succeed at what?" Taemin asked. "We still don't know what's in that chamber. What if it's something that makes everything worse?" But the decision was taken out of their hands. Back on Earth, the ascensionist governments had already begun implementing genetic modifications on volunteers. Within 2 weeks, the first modified humans emerged. They looked the same as before, but tests showed their DNA had changed. New genes were active. Old limitations were removed, and they could feel the difference. One volunteer, a woman named Sora, described it during a broadcast that reached every corner of human space. "It's like I was living my whole life with weights on my body and someone just cut them off. I can think faster. See connections I never saw before. My emotions are still there, but they're clearer, more focused. I don't feel less human. I feel more human." Within days, 50,000 people had volunteered for the modifications. Within a month, the number reached 500,000. Not everyone who underwent the process felt positive about it. Some reported feeling disconnected from their old selves, like they had lost something important even as they gained new capabilities. But enough people reported positive experiences that the demand kept growing. The preservationists fought back with their own campaign. Deho gave speeches warning that humanity was committing slow suicide, trading their identity for power they didn't understand. "We are more than our genetics," he said. "We are our choices, our culture, our shared history. If we change what we are at the fundamental level, we lose all of that." The galaxy watched with fascination and horror. Some species saw it as proof that humans were dangerous and unstable. Others saw it as courage or recklessness, depending on their perspective. The Kralix Federation increased their blockade of human space, now justifying it as a quarantine measure to prevent modified humans from spreading. War Master Kethris sent a message directly to Ambassador Jiho. "Your species is fracturing in real time. You are proving that you are not ready for the precursor legacy. Stand down. Let the elder species handle this threat." "What threat?" Jiho replied. "You still don't believe the correction is real. I believe that your species has found ancient weapons and is now undergoing genetic modification to better use those weapons. Whether you call it the correction or something else, The result is the same. Humanity is becoming a threat to galactic stability. 3 human colonies went dark after Kralix forces established full blockades around them. Communication was cut off. Supply ships were turned away. Jiho filed formal protests, but the Galactic Council was deadlocked. Half the species supported the Kralix position. The other half urged caution and diplomacy. Then the Kralix made their move. A military fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, not invading, not yet, but present, a show of force. The message was clear. Humanity needed to surrender the vaults or face the consequences. Earth's defense fleet was no match for Kralix's military power. Humanity had been in space for 200 years. The Kralix had been building their military for 8,000. The technological gap was enormous, even with the precursor technology humans had recovered. Taemin received an emergency message from Jiho. "We need to know what's in that central chamber, whatever advantage it might give us. We're running out of time." Minho had been preparing for this. He had refined the genetic modification protocol, tested it on tissue samples, run every safety check he could think of. "I'm ready," he told Yuna. "Let me open the chamber." "This is a mistake," Yuna said. But she didn't stop him. What else could they do? The modification process took 6 hours. Minho lay in a medical pod while nanomachines rebuilt parts of his genetic structure, according to the precursor template. Taemin and Suman monitored his vital signs, watching as his DNA slowly changed. His brain activity spiked several times, causing alarms, but then stabilized at a new normal level. When he emerged, Minho looked the same. But his eyes were different, more alert, more aware. "I can hear it," he said softly. "The vault. It's been trying to talk to us this whole time, and we couldn't hear it. But now I can." He walked to the central chamber's entrance, and Taemin and Suman followed. Minho placed his hand on the scanner. This time it accepted him immediately. The door began to open, revealing another corridor beyond, this one leading deep into the planet's core. They walked for an hour, following a path that spiraled downward. The walls changed as they descended, becoming less technological and more organic. The bioluminescent patterns grew stronger, pulsing in rhythms that matched their heartbeats. Finally, they reached the central chamber. It was massive, easily a kilometer in diameter. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. And in the center, floating in a stasis field, was a sphere of light. "What is it?" Suman whispered. Minho approached the sphere slowly. His modified mind was receiving information that the others couldn't sense. "It's a message," he said, "from the precursors, their final communication. But it's not just information. It's a choice, an offer." The sphere pulsed, and suddenly they all could hear it, not with their ears, but directly in their minds. The voice was the same neutral tone the vault had used when Taemin first opened it, but now it carried emotional weight. "To our inheritors, if you have reached this chamber, you have survived longer than any of our previous attempts. You have the genetic foundation we designed, the technology we left behind, the warnings we recorded, but you lack the final element, unity of purpose, and without it you will fail as the others failed." The sphere showed them images, the architects dying as their perfect logic failed them, other species tearing themselves apart in civil wars over resources, ideology, power. Pattern after pattern of self-destruction. We learned too late that survival requires more than intelligence or technology. It requires wisdom. The wisdom to know when to change and when to remain the same. The wisdom to recognize threats not just from outside but from within. The message continued. "We offer you a path. Genetic modifications that will unlock your full potential, not forced but chosen freely by each individual. Those who accept will gain capabilities beyond normal human limits. Those who refuse will remain as they are. Both paths are valid. Both are necessary. The correction is coming," the voice said. "Sooner than you know. It will test everything you are, and you will survive it only if you can accept that humanity is not one thing. It is many things. Modified and unmodified, ascended and preserved, united not in sameness but in shared purpose. The choice is yours. The vault will release all its technology, all its knowledge, to all humans, modified or not. But know this, the technology alone will not save you. Only wisdom can do that. Learn from our mistakes. Be better than we were, and perhaps you will be the ones who finally break the cycle." The sphere began to dim. The voice faded, and Taemin understood. The precursors hadn't been trying to create a perfect species. They had been trying to create a wise one. The message from the central chamber changed everything, but not in the way anyone expected. When Minho, Taemin, and Sumin returned to the surface and shared what they had learned, the reaction was complex. Some people felt validated in their choices whether to modify or preserve themselves. Others felt manipulated, like the precursors were still controlling humanity, even from beyond death. But one thing became clear. The vaults were no longer exclusive to humans. The moment the central chamber opened, every vault across 17 worlds broadcast the same signal. Their technology was now available to any species that approached with peaceful intent. The genetic locks remained for certain sections, but the majority of precursor knowledge opened to everyone. The Kralix fleet at the edge of Earth's solar system received the broadcast. Warmaster Kethra stood on her command deck, watching the data stream in. Her tactical officers were analyzing it, trying to determine if it was a trick. But the information was genuine. Weapon systems, shield technology, power generation, all of it accessible now. She contacted Ambassador Jiho. What is the meaning of this? The precursors left a message, Jiho explained. Humanity was never meant to hoard their legacy. We were meant to share it. The vaults are open to everyone now. Why? Kethris demanded. Why would your species give up such an advantage? Because it was never really ours, Jiho said. We were just the key that opened the door. What happens next depends on all of us. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in 8,000 years, they had to completely reevaluate the balance of power. The Kralix Federation could no longer claim military superiority based on ancient technology. Every species now had access to the same tools. Some species embraced the change immediately. The Vorthon sent research teams to study the vaults with human scientists. The Melkori, beings of pure energy, found ways to interface with precursor technology that even humans hadn't discovered. Others were more cautious, suspicious that this was still somehow a human trick, but the countdown continued. 18 months became 16, then 14. The correction was coming, and now they had to prepare together. Dr. Yuna found herself leading an unprecedented research collaboration. Scientists from 40 different species worked together, analyzing precursor data about the correction, trying to understand what it was and how to defend against it. The data was fragmentary, but a picture began to emerge. The correction wasn't a weapon or a fleet. It was more like a force of nature, a wave that moved through space and reset any civilization that had become too advanced. The precursors theorized it was an automated system, left behind by an even older species to prevent any single civilization from dominating the galaxy. When it detected certain technological signatures, certain levels of advancement, it responded. How do we stop it? Asked Dr. Venn, a Vorthon physicist whose crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns as he worked. Maybe we don't stop it, Sumin suggested. She had been analyzing the precursor communication patterns, the deep narrative embedded in everything they left behind. Maybe we learn to live with it. The precursors tried to fight it and failed, but they never tried to understand it, to communicate with it. You want to talk to an extinction-level threat? Minho asked. He was still adjusting to his modifications, learning to control the enhanced capabilities they gave him. Sometimes he would get lost in thought, his mind processing information too fast for his speech to keep up. Why not? Sumin replied. If it's automated, maybe we can reason with its programming. If it's alive, maybe we can negotiate. The precursors assumed it was mindless, but they never confirmed that. It was a radical idea, but they had few others. The combined military forces of every galactic species together might slow the correction, but the precursor data suggested they couldn't stop it. Not with weapons. Maybe not at all. Taemin had been quiet through most of these discussions. He spent his time in the vaults, walking through chambers that now welcomed researchers from dozens of species. It was strange seeing Kralix soldiers studying alongside human scientists, Vorthon engineers working with Melkori technicians. The crisis had forced cooperation where politics had failed. One day, while exploring a section of the vault that analyzed historical patterns, he found something the others had missed. It was a small data file, labeled only with a symbol that translated roughly as pattern exception. The file contained records of 3 times when the correction had arrived at a civilization and then left without destroying it. 3 times in billions of years. The records were incomplete, but one pattern stood out. In each case, the civilization had fundamentally changed their approach to technology and expansion just before the correction arrived. They had stopped trying to dominate their environment and started trying to harmonize with it. Stopped seeing the universe as something to control and started seeing it as something to understand. Taman brought this to Yuna's attention. She assembled the research team, including representatives from multiple species. They analyzed the pattern exceptions for weeks, trying to understand what had triggered the correction's retreat. It's testing for wisdom, Yuna concluded. The correction doesn't destroy civilizations just for being advanced. It destroys them for being dangerously advanced, for using their technology without understanding the consequences. The 3 exceptions survived because they demonstrated wisdom. How do we demonstrate wisdom to an automated system? War Master Kethris asked. She had joined the research effort after the Kralix government formally withdrew their blockade. 8,000 years of military thinking made her skeptical of nonviolent solutions, but she was willing to consider them. By changing, said Minho, by showing we're not a threat. Over the next 6 months, something unprecedented happened. The galactic community began to transform itself, not through military action or political maneuvering, but through choice. Species that had competed for resources began to cooperate. Territorial disputes that had lasted millennia were resolved through negotiation instead of force. The modified humans played an unexpected role in this. Their enhanced capabilities for pattern recognition and long-term thinking helped them see connections others missed. But the unmodified humans were equally important, providing emotional wisdom and adaptability that modified humans sometimes lacked. Humanity itself began to heal. The Ascensionists and Preservationists realized they didn't have to be enemies. Modified and unmodified humans started working together, each bringing different strengths. Deho and Hana, leaders of the opposing movements, met in Geneva and publicly shook hands, agreeing that both paths were valid. We are not one humanity, Deho said during the broadcast that was watched by billions. We are many humanities, and that is our strength. The vaults provided the technology needed for this transformation. Systems that could provide unlimited clean energy, eliminating resource conflicts, medical devices that could cure any disease, removing one of the primary drivers of inequality, communication technology that made distance irrelevant, allowing true cultural exchange across light years. But technology alone wasn't enough. Every species had to choose to use it wisely. 3 months before the correction's projected arrival, the galaxy held its breath. They had done everything they could. Defensive systems were in place, but everyone knew they were more symbolic than practical. If the correction decided to destroy them, it would. The real defense was what they had become. A galaxy-wide civilization that used its technology not to conquer or dominate, but to understand and cooperate. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, but the overall pattern had shifted. When the correction arrived, it was nothing like anyone expected. It wasn't a fleet or a weapon. It was a phenomenon, a wave of energy that swept through the galaxy, analyzing every world, every civilization, every technology signature. Taman watched from the vault on Kepler 442b as the wave approached. It passed through the planet like it wasn't there, but every sensor lit up. The vault systems activated in response, broadcasting information about humanity and the galactic community, showing the changes they had made, the wisdom they had gained. The wave paused. For 3 days it hovered at the edge of human space, analyzing, considering. Then it moved on, continuing its journey through the galaxy without destroying anything. The relief was universal. Ships across 100 worlds celebrated. Humanity had passed the test. The galaxy had passed the test. But Yuna stood in the research lab, looking at the data from those 3 days, and felt unsettled. It's not over, she said to anyone who would listen. The correction accepted us this time, but it will come back. Maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 1,000,000, and we'll have to prove ourselves again. Then we'll prove ourselves again, Suman replied. She was optimistic by nature, always had been. We know how now. We know what wisdom looks like. We just have to keep choosing it. Minho nodded. His modified mind could see patterns stretching far into the future, probability chains that made his head hurt if he focused on them too long. The precursors wanted us to break the cycle. They created us to be the species that could survive the correction not just once but permanently, by learning, by adapting. by being willing to change when change is needed and preserve what's important when preservation is necessary. Taman thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first moment when he placed his hand on the vault scanner, not knowing what would happen. Through the revelation of human origins, the political crisis, the divisions, and the healing, humanity hadn't just inherited the precursor legacy. They had earned it. 5 years later, Taman stood in a new research facility on Earth, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was different now. 50 species that had barely cooperated before were now deeply integrated, sharing technology and culture. Humans, both modified and unmodified, played their role in this new order, not as rulers or inheritors but as catalysts. The vaults remained open, their knowledge available to anyone who sought it. But more importantly, the wisdom they represented had spread, the understanding that technology without wisdom was destruction, that advancement without ethics was suicide. Yuna had retired from active research but still advised the Global Assembly.
Minho led a genetics institute that helped species understand their own biological potential.
Suman had become the galaxy's foremost expert on precursor culture and communication. Ambassador Jiho served his 4th term on the Galactic Council's inner circle. And Taman continued exploring vaults. There were hundreds more that had been discovered across the galaxy, each one containing new secrets, new technologies, new warnings. The precursors had left a vast legacy, and it would take centuries to fully understand it. But that was okay. Humanity had time now. The correction had accepted them. And as long as they maintained their wisdom, as long as they remembered what they had learned, they would continue to survive. The vault on Kepler 442b still stood. The first one opened. The one that had changed everything. It had become a pilgrimage site, visited by billions from hundreds of species. They came to see where the Anomaly protocol had succeeded, where humanity had proven that imperfection, guided by wisdom, was stronger than perfection without it. Taman visited it once a year, placing his hand on the same scanner that had first recognized him as an inheritor. The vault always responded the same way. Human Anomaly approved. Welcome home, inheritor. And every time Taman smiled, because he understood now what that really meant. Not that he was special or chosen, but that every human, every being who chose wisdom over power, understanding over domination, cooperation over conquest, was an inheritor of something far more valuable than technology. They were inheritors of hope. Hope that the cycle could be broken, hope that civilization could advance without destroying itself, hope that the future, vast and unknown, could be shaped by wisdom rather than fear. The galaxy stretched above him, full of possibilities, full of challenges yet to come. But for the first time in 50 million years, those challenges would be faced not by one species alone, but by a community of species working together. The precursors had left behind their legacy. Humanity had accepted it not as a burden or a privilege, but as a responsibility. And in doing so, they had become something the precursors themselves had never achieved. Truly wise. The stars shone above, and Taman knew that somewhere among them, in quantum spaces beyond normal reality, the precursors were watching. And maybe, just maybe, they were proud.